Welcome back. Our second debate tonight, a day after more than 80 Russian missiles rained on Ukraine, including in the capital Kyiv. New Delhi has decided to slightly differ with Moscow at the UNGA. Last night, India voted in favor of a public vote on a draft resolution denouncing Russia's illegal annexation of 4 regions of Ukraine. Tonight is going to be the important vote, and it'll be interesting to see what position India takes at the UNGA vote. Remember, all of the votes so far, and there have been at least half a dozen, at the Security Council, at the UNGA, India has abstained from. Now, India effectively, with yesterday's procedural vote saying no secret ballot, it has to be made public. But Putin is doubling down, especially after the weekend attack on the Crimea bridge and after yesterday's series of missile attacks in at least a dozen cities across Ukraine. He is sending out a very, very clear signal that this war is about to get a lot more bloody before it starts getting any better. How long can countries like India continue to follow this path of abstaining on votes, following this path of neutrality, as it were? Because the longer and bloodier this war continues, the more difficult and more untenable that position becomes.
The Ukraine conflict continues to rage. We are often asked, whose side are we on? India is on the side of peace and will remain firmly there.
All right, joining us on the talking point this evening, G. Partsarthi is former diplomat, Dr. Swasti Rao, associate fellow at the IDSA. Olga Vazliakova is a Ukrainian member of parliament. Dr. Sergei Dvoranyov is president of IDC Russia. Let me start with our foreign guests. I'll start with the Ukrainian member of parliament, Olga. What happened over the last 3-4 days? First, with the Crimea bridge attacks that happened over the weekend, and yesterday, the series of missile strikes across major cities in your country. Do you believe that the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin are indicating, not just to you, but also to the West and to NATO, that this war is going to get far more violent, far more bloody, and perhaps far more casualties before we reach some kind of finality, some kind of conclusion?
Yes, we don't see the end, but we still fight, and we want to see Ukraine with all this territory of Ukraine consists in our country, and we want to fight till we will achieve the peace and we'll join all our territory to Ukraine back.
But some would say that the bombing of the Crimea bridge, which the Kremlin called a terrorist attack, that changed the whole dynamic of this war, because Crimea was not on the table up until the weekend. And suddenly, by bombing the bridge, you signaled to Putin that even Crimea is up in this war.
Nobody knows what was in the Crimean bridge, and I don't see the reason for us to do something with that. And this auto which moved on this bridge, it was moved from Russia to Crimea. That's why nobody knows and nobody concerns that this situation, this coincidence was made by Ukrainians.
Okay.
So I don't see any concerns about this bridge and the situation in Ukraine.
Dr. Sergei,
last 2 days.
The point is the Crimea bridge, for whatever reason it got bombed out. Now the business has come back to a semblance of normalcy there. But Dr. Sergei, by yesterday's actions, by the series of missile hits, and particularly civilians being hit, I mean, one of the missiles even landed inside the University of Kyiv. How long can Putin continue to do this? Because the international community is going to turn around and say, whatever reasons there were for him to launch this special military operation, after 7 months, you can't keep attacking civilians.
It's a good question. How long time? You know, it's a famous
really?
symbol of three monkeys. One monkey closed her eyes, second monkey closed her ears, and the last monkey closed her mouth. What is about? Is a Western world, is United States of America, United Kingdom, and Europe. During 8 years, how many? 8 years. It was violence. Who started with violence? Ukraine started with violence to the Russian population of the east part of Ukraine. That's why our national leader was so tolerant and always tried to approach to the brain, to the, we can take intelligence of Ukrainian politicians, not only current president, who was before state naked on the stage like a clown. And
but Dr. Sergey, these four regions that you're talking about, where the referendums happened and the annexation happened last week, since Ukraine became an independent country in 1991, these four regions have been Ukrainian. There's no doubt about that.
Today, Volodymyr Zelensky told that he refused to go to any peacemaking conversation, dialogue, or any negotiation with peace with Vladimir Putin. We have our current president. He also president. Why he refused?
No, but you can't annex Ukrainian sovereign territory in a referendum and then bomb missiles across 12 cities, kill about a dozen civilians, and then say, come and talk to us.
Yes,
it's not the way it works.
You know that territory, you know very well the four regions, it was the will of the nations who speaks Russian language. And before it belonged to Russia, that was their choice, freedom, their will to join to Russia. We cannot tell that is the sovereign territory of Ukraine. It's not like this.
Okay, let me ask Ambassador Parsati. No one is disputing that there may have been majority Russian speakers in those four regions. But what this does is it puts countries like India in a difficult position, Ambassador Parsati, because let's face it, historical fact is post-91, when Ukraine became a sovereign nation, these four regions were Ukrainian territory. Now, you could argue that a majority of the people there don't want to continue with Ukraine, therefore the referendums happen, therefore the annexation happened. But as per UN laws, you can't, simply come in and have a referendum and annex somebody else's sovereign territory.
May I say something?
Yeah, one second. I'm coming back to you, Olga. Ambassador Parsati.
I want to say now.
Just give me 30 seconds. I'll come back to you.
Let me say this.
Ambassador Parsati.
Indian media still call this
Ambassador
war
Parsati,
like a special operation because it's.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Ambassador G. Parsati, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
That question was for you, sir. Yes, go ahead.
I was rather amused by this sort of exchange. Let's make one thing clear. I leave the rest of Ukraine aside, but Crimea has been the headquarters of the US fleet, the Russian fleet, since 1783. Ukraine never exercised sovereignty over Crimea after that. Secondly, the southern part of Ukraine has a very large Russian population. But still, this is not an issue which can be resolved by conflict. I go back to the Prime Minister's statement that today's era is not an era of war. So there is much to be said for both sides. As I said, I don't know why, Russia, which has held territory since 1783, and the fleet has been continuously deployed there. So for Ukraine, I'm not taking sides, but it is a shady question. The fact of the matter is that the Russian side has taken pretty hard casualties in recent days. But having lived in Russia for quite a bit of time and known them, they will take that in their stride. This is the first point. So you have to go back to negotiations And as far as vote in the UN Security Council is concerned, sure, we would like everything to be discussed, but that does not mean we are taking sides one way or another. Then coming to the dispute itself, the operations are largely in southern Ukraine, where in in Ukraine, the Russian population is about 7.4 million. So that's across. They have settled there. There is no military solution, and as far as I can see, pushing one side or another is dangerous.
Okay.
Because my own feeling is that pushed to a corner, Russia has 2,000 tactical nuclear weapons, and President Putin has not ruled out its use. Another point about present-day tactical nuclear weapons. Everybody talks about Hiroshima or Nagasaki, which had a 14 megawatt capacity. Today, Russia has 2,000 nuclear weapons, which capacity is as low as 1.1 ton, as against 14 tons earlier on. So I think everybody should behave more responsibility.
Okay.
Prime Minister said that this is not an era of war, and we don't want these two countries to head us all into a nuclear war, and it will happen. Let us be clear, the Ukrainians can act very bravely at the present, but they couldn't do so 3 months ago, before the Americans started pouring in weapons. And once the Americans come in, it is no longer a Russian-Ukrainian fight. Another point, on September 14 last year, Biden and Putin signed a declaration which more or less said that Crimea is a part, and by all accounts, the whole of Ukraine is contestable. But as I said, Crimea has been under Russian control since the 18th century.
Let me ask Dr. Swasti Rao.
Let all this be discussed in the UN General Assembly.
2 points.
And we'll see.
One, tonight when that vote happens, it's going to be at least framed by a large number of countries, including Ukraine, the United States, the entire West, as sovereign territory of a country. There are referendums that are announced unilaterally. There are annexations that happen unilaterally. Can India be seen as not taking a position on that, number one? And number two, the longer the escalation continues, where civilians are attacked, yesterday civilians were attacked for the first time in many months, again, can India as a peace-loving nation, and the foreign minister said this at the UNGA, India is on the side of peace. How long can India continue to abstain votes at the UNGA and the UNSC when civilians are getting killed?
Right, Zakka. Good evening. Thank you for letting me in now. The first thing is that India has already sort of not supported the illegal referenda that happened in the end of, towards the end of September, and the results were declared. And India, and not just India, I would also like to sort of remind everyone here that no country under the sun, including Russia's friends like China, Hungary, Serbia, whoever, nobody has justified the referenda. Nobody has said. They have all denounced and said that we uphold our territorial integrity of Ukraine. So that is an important point that we must remember, that while we may not, for diplomatic and other reasons, may not outwardly go on and criticize Russia, but it is another thing to say that we uphold the referenda and the results of the referenda. That is the first point. The second point is, as far as the results of the referenda are concerned, and about the Russian population, let me also make a humble, so to say, reminder, to all of our viewers here, including the panelists, is that the fact that Russian populations or pockets of Russian populations are living in Ukraine is not Ukraine's reality alone. It is the same reality. The same Russian populations that were living in Georgia, that were annexed by Russia in a 5-day, 7-day war in South Abkhazia and Ossetia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Similarly, there are pockets of Russians living in the Baltics that Russia has been destabilizing for decades. There are pockets of Russians living in Moldova's Transnistria, where there is a separatist movement that Russia has been fanning for decades. So it is not Ukraine alone. The difference this time is that Ukraine is being supported constantly by the West. So actually, this is a war between West and Russia. And let me also just make a humble submission here that if Russia is so clear on the fact that it is not Ukrainians but the Westerners that are fighting, that why not target the Westerners directly and get them involved? right? So, I mean, there is somebody who has to call the bluff. You are dealing with there is a battlefront which is happening in the east or southeast of Ukraine, which is the Donbass region, and you've mentioned, Donetsk, Luhansk, etc. There are two counteroffensives which are where the real battle is being fought right now as we are discussing. One is at the northeast where, the town of Liman, the Liman offensive that was recently in news, Svatove and Liman and all those towns are located near the Oskil River. And then in the south where, there's another counteroffensive in Kherson region, which is being, launched by Ukraine. And as we are talking, Ukraine is regaining its territory village by village. Now, as far as that battlefront is concerned, and at Bakhmut and, basically that front line, there is nothing that Russia is doing there. I mean, the problem with respect to command and control, the problem with respect to operational, aspects of Russian military planning is completely out there. They are not doing anything. What they are doing, on the contrary, is that they are targeting Kyiv and all that you mentioned. So the first thing that we need to remember is that there has to be a fundamental difference between civilian targets and military targets. Okay, I mean, there is no way under the sun that can be justified. And the last thing is that the Crimea bridge attacks, okay? And Crimea is very much a part of the contested war right now. Even though Russia has been having control of it, I agree. But the fact that Crimea was illegally annexed in 2014 also remains to be a fact. It was not done by any international law. Okay. It was annexed by Russia. And
Dr. Sergey, I think the most important point that Dr. Swasti Rao made is where the real battlefield is, where the real front line is. Over the last 3 to 4 weeks or so, Russia has been facing massive reverses, whether it's in Izium, whether it's in Kupiansk, whether it's in Liman, the other places that she outlined on the outskirts of Kharkiv and Kherson. And that is where this battle is going to get decided. In the middle of that, to attack civilians in Kyiv and other cities, not only are you drawing the wrath of the international community, but you're also trying to divert attention from the battlefield losses that you're seeing in these front lines. Dr. Sergey.
Yes, first of all, Henry Ford told once that nobody can be winner on the world. Mm-hmm. And I completely believe that we still have a chance. After 8 years, when the Russian population on eastern part of Ukraine was destroyed completely, was always on the fears, always in anxiety, how to be survived. Vladimir Putin take care his responsibility, took this part speaker citizens back to Russia. Right now, you can see on the Western media, or especially in Ukrainian media, after they destroyed Crimea bridge, it was like a festival, like a celebration. That yes, we did it. Everybody was so joyful. I am very sad, first of all, because some civilians was under the weapon. Of course, it's a price. Any price on the world is a big price because it's the price of the lives of the people. I am believer. Right now, I'm giving this interview in Vrindavan. I especially came to a significant place of India to pray for peace, to pray for the future of civilization. That's why I think that we should use this chance. And I completely believe that India is the most powerful country in the world right now because it has so strong and deep roots about peace. Om Shanti Om. And the Indian leader can be big supporter and mediator. Because today Vladimir Zelensky refused to make a conversation with Vladimir Putin. How it's possible? Okay. You can sit at the table with somebody mediator and listen what mediator will suggest to you. That is the point. We should be very practical.
All right. I'll give Ambassador Parsati the final word. I think there have been about 6 votes so far at the UN, including both in the UNGA and in the UNSC. And in all of those votes, India has abstained. What may be India's position tonight, especially because it's about the referendums, the annexation? It's like saying, as somebody said in the newsroom, tomorrow if Pakistan were to announce a sham referendum in Kashmir and then go and make this announcement to the world that majority of Kashmiris have voted to join Pakistan in that referendum, how may India respond?
Look, what India has done is block any move to prevent and support this issue being discussed in the UN General Assembly. I think that was right. The General, I still recall the American and Chinese position in the Bangladesh conflict. But as I said earlier, The Ukrainian, the Russians, you are playing with fire in an era of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. If you play around like this, yes, there has to be a negotiated settlement. Yes, the territorial integrity of Ukraine has to be respected. Whether it includes Crimea or not is something for the negotiating table. The territorial integrity has to be respected. But I think the fact of the matter is, on Crimea, there will be no give from the Russians. As far as the rest, I think they would be well advised to negotiate. So you can always negotiate a settlement in which access to the sea is granted. And this whole conflict, I can't see the Russians wanting to take over other areas where, yes, there is a Russian population, but not in a large majority.
Okay, we'll leave it
Finally,
at that.
I think
I want to
let us be also clear.
I'm out of time, sir. Really sorry about that.
Last point. Ukraine and Washington provoked Russia by the declaration of November 10th when they, spoke out blatantly and unnecessarily.
Okay.
In strong terms.
All right.
As you said, this is an era of peace.
Of peace and not of
not
war.
an era of war.
Okay.
And
we're
you
going to
don't
leave it at
make,
that. Thank you very
like
much,
that.
Ambassador Parthasarathy, Dr. Swasti Rao, and Dr. Sergey for joining us. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian MP had to leave the show. We'll leave it at that. We'll see how the vote happens at the UNGA later tonight. That's a wrap. In a moment, Maria Shakil joining you with News Epicenter.